Ma Maniere strikes again in the sneaker world. But is it too little, too late? We're going to discuss that this time on Fire Footwear. Welcome back to Fire Footwear, everybody. As always, this is your host, Matt Frates. I hope that this finds you well, as always. And as always, I want to thank you for tuning into this show. We continue to grow. We continue to evolve here on Fire Footwear. And while the sneaker community has changed a lot over the years, one of the things that has not changed is just how loyal all of you are to this show. And it means the world to me, so I thank you for that. I mentioned at the top of the show that we're going to talk about Ma Maniere. And that's true, but it's also untrue in a way, because we're going to talk about Ma Maniere, but we're also going to talk about something else that has happened. In the last week or so, Ma Maniere has obviously made headlines by revealing what they're calling their While You Were Sleeping collection. I say collection because it is a collection of multiple silhouettes. It is not just a pack of, say, 2 or 3. And maybe that's splitting hairs, maybe that's just semantics, but in my mind, when you put out the amount of output that they're putting out for this particular release, that's a collection in my mind. And they did so in a way that I think went kind of under the radar in terms of its historical perspective, because this collection is notable by being only the second time that any collaborator has worked with Nike, Jordan Brand, and Converse for a single collection. And that is following in the footsteps of a very, very important person who is now deceased in the sneaker world. That's Virgil Abloh. And that collection was the 10 from 2017. I know sometimes it's hard to believe that that collection is so old now, but it is. The 10 is considered old in today's sneaker market. However, Ma Maniere made news because of all of the volume of silhouettes that they've come out with. And while the silhouettes are important, to me, I think I think of something a little bit different. But let's go over the pack, or the collection as we call it. So there's, of course, the Air Jordan 3, which we've already seen an Air Jordan 3 from Ma Maniere, the very first one. Probably one of my favorite shoes from 2021. I do own a pair. It is incredible fire. It is incredible quality, but admittedly, it is very difficult to style sometimes. I find myself wearing it mostly in the fall and the winter. But at the outset, honestly, I think it's still a very, very fire shoe. And I think it has actually worn very well in terms of how it has grown. There's also an Air Jordan 4 in this collection, which is, again, a departure from the first Air Jordan 4 that they did. A different color scheme with pinks and burgundy tones, and it just really takes something like the Air Jordan 4, which historically has not been seen as quality, and made it high quality. There's an Air Force 1 Low, which is a silhouette in my mind that is very important to sneaker culture. And this particular execution of it, at least from the pictures, looks very, very fire. It's a tan base, the silver swooshes, a semi-translucent outsole. It's kind of a modern twist, although taking some of the design elements that are very in these days, and I'm thinking about the translucent outsole, it's becoming a little bit more in. But when I looked at this pack, I honestly felt, and see, there I go again, when I looked at this collection, to me, that was something that stood out. There's an Air Max 95. Now, the Air Max 95 is interesting because I believe the Air Max 95 is kind of one of those if you know silhouettes. And what I mean by that is that if you rock with 95s, you're probably of a certain age, and you probably remember the significance, the cultural significance that the Air Max 95 had. But if you don't, if you're a younger person, that silhouette today probably looks a little bit whack to you. And that's okay, because the 90s was a very specific time in terms of design. When you go back and look at basketball shoes from the 1990s, they do look 1990s. And the Air Max 95 was a unique silhouette. If go look up the Air Max 95 Neons, probably the most famous colorway of the Air Max 95. There have been others, but that one is probably at the pinnacle in terms of greatest Air Max 95s ever created. However, in today's world, I think you have to take something that has that kind of palette, that has that kind of look. I think you need to soften it a little bit. And one of the things about Ma Maniere is their sort of color blocking and their branding is a softening of a lot of these silhouettes. And so you're seeing that on the Air Max 95, and it's got some browns and some other subtle branding on it. And I believe that this is going to be kind of the sleeper for a lot of people, but we'll see. There is the Converse Weapon Low, which pays homage to Converse's basketball heritage, and it has an off-white and soft brown color palette, again, softening It's really a very comforting look. And Converse, again, a lot of people may forget that they do have a basketball heritage. They are steeped in basketball history before Jordan Brand. This is an example of when I say go back into the history books, do your research, do your homework, because if you think of Converse as just the Chuck All-Stars, today they're an all-purpose shoe. But back in the day, they were what players wore to play basketball. And some of the greatest of all time prior to Michael Jordan wore Converse on the court. It's just the way that it was. And so this is paying homage to that, which I really, really like. And I think the most outlandish inclusion in this collection is the Air Jordan 39. But I don't think it's that crazy because the Air Jordan 39, at least in its design, they went to Michael to get design nods for it. I wonder how long it had been since they'd actually done that, because I did an episode a while back this year talking about how maybe the brand needs to move away from Michael Jordan. And we're not just ripping the Band-Aid off of that, but obviously they listened to that. They said, absolutely not. We are going to take nods from Michael. We are going to design this shoe with Michael in mind, even though it can be argued, despite what Spike Lee says, that Michael is almost irrelevant today. But they're going that route. And obviously in a collection like this, Ma Maniere is being told, look, we're going to give you free reign to go into the archive and do whatever you want with a lot of these silhouettes. But you got to do us a solid by taking the Air Jordan 39. And it's no shade at it. You got contrasting dark and light brown tones on it, just like the rest of the collection. But the Air Jordan 39 is a hooping shoe, first and foremost. It is not, in my opinion, a casual wear shoe. I know there is a lot of debate as to whether you should wear basketball shoes with jeans and all that, and I'm not here for that argument, but the Air Jordan 39, the way that it was constructed, it had hooping in mind. And so I think this is going to be the one that probably doesn't sell as much, but you may see some of the NBA players wearing this out on the court because I think it has the function to go with it, obviously, and it's a fire look. So I think you're going to be seeing it more on the court than you will off the court. But what does this collection represent? I think this collection actually represents a pretty significant thing in terms of what Nike is looking to do. Perhaps I'm reading a little bit too much into it, but when I look at this and I think about the significance of this collection, the fact that it is only the second to do this next to Off-White and Virgil Abloh, and in my mind, I feel like at this point, Ma Maniere is being publicly crowned as the next Off-White. And I mean that in terms of they're the king of the collaborators when it comes to Nike Jordan specifically. And I think a lot of people might balk at that and say, what are you talking about? You can never have another Off-White. And that is totally true. They're not exactly going after the same thing in terms of how they design their shoes and their collaborations. But I think the idea is that Nike is looking for a flagship collaborator, some brand that they can go to and basically make the face of collaborations with Nike and Jordan Brand. And who better in today's age in some way than Ma Maniere? The interesting factor, though, is the fact that Ma Maniere has been doing this for a while. This is not their first or right after a huge hit. We're talking about getting to the point of oversaturation with a lot of these. To the point that the Air Jordan 3, which just released earlier this week, didn't really sell very well. They were sitting later in the day, and perhaps that's because the shoe itself wasn't as good as the first, but I think it also has to do with these rising prices. The brands are asking us more and more from our wallet, and we continue to pay it. But in certain aspects, something like this, I don't think that we are. I think that in this collection, the least seen silhouettes are probably going to be the ones that sell the most. But Nike is looking for a flagship, and I think that they have it here. But I hypothesize that it's too little too late. I think they have waited a little bit too long to crown somebody, and you could argue that they could have given it to others, but they haven't. Union has done a lot of great work, but they've never really been given this kind of a collection. Undefeated, you name it. There have been a ton of collaborators. I think even Travis Scott doing the same thing over and over and over again. That's not flagship. This collection, to me, screams flagship. But while we're on the subject of prices, I do want to talk about something else that is sort of related. But Nike, while I think trying to, again, crown Ma Maniere as this flagship and sort of pay homage to the past, is also looking to their future. And I think that this next rumor, because it is not confirmed, it really represents the juxtaposition that I find that Nike finds themselves in. The rumor, and this is per Soul Savvy via their Instagram page, they are saying that Nike is toying with the idea of a sneaker subscription. The concept being that you, the consumer, pay, I think it was like $200 per month, and you were guaranteed one release every single month. $200 is a lot of money per month, and maybe people don't think of $200 as a lot, but I think the average listener of the show probably says, wow, $200 a month, that's a lot. When you think about it in totality for a year, it starts to add up. And I think that the idea is that, hey, we're going to open ourselves to our consumer. Their biggest complaint that they hear is that there's not enough access. So in order to give people access, we're going to charge them a monthly fee, and they're going to be guaranteed access to a certain amount of heat that they might not have been able to get before. And on the surface, it's actually a good idea. However, when I said they were at a juxtaposition, the reason I say that is because this is all counter to how the culture has worked up until this point. And I understand that the internet and social media and everything has changed a lot. Rarely do we actually go out to stores and pick things up anymore. But I believe that the culture is still made up of a lot of people who did that and who still probably would do it in a certain way. And maybe there are people who are getting older like myself who wouldn't really consider sitting out in the rain or some of these conditions to go get a shoe that they want. However, I kind of feel like a model like this takes away some of the clout that comes with how much you put into the culture. And the clout is not necessarily important, but I think it is important when it comes to building culture. One of the ways that you build culture around sneakers is a lot of people share stories. That's why podcasts like mine, Sneak This, Sock Jig, you name it, that's why they all exist, because we all tell our own stories through our own prism in sneakers. And if you now have a subscription service, what you've done is open up this culture to just about anybody, and you don't really have to do anything to earn your place in the culture. Now, I should caveat that by saying, and I've said it many times, I am not an OG. I did not sit outside for shoes because my life was just not in that place then, and I was not in a place financially to be a part of sneakers. So I'm not sitting here telling you that I've earned my place. However, what I try and do is give back to the culture via this podcast and via being accessible to people who do listen to it. And so I'm doing what I can. But there are a lot of people who've been in this game for a very, very long time who are going to look at a subscription and say, that's not sneaker culture. That doesn't make you part of the culture. Just having access to the shoes. To me, it fundamentally is the same as what people say about replica sneakers. And we've talked about that before. That replica sneakers in a lot of ways diminishes the accomplishments of others, because when you can just go out and get anything that you want, it takes away the work that other people put in. And that's a perspective that I have gained over the last year because I've heard other people talk about it. And while I, again, don't fault anybody for wearing reps, wouldn't fault anybody for subscribing to this subscription service, I understand the point that a lot of people who've invested real time, real money, and real emotion into this culture, how they would feel about something like that. That if it's that easy, then there's really no culture. And I wonder where this goes. If Nike actually does implement this, I think it will be fascinating. The reason I say that is because I think a lot of people will jump on it. Because in their eyes, they're already spending at least $200 a month on a shoe. And if they can do so and guarantee themselves some heat that maybe other people will think of them differently because they have it, I think that's worth it to a lot of people. I would not do it because my buying habits have changed so much. And despite having a sneaker podcast, I don't buy a lot. I've bought 3 pairs all year long, and that's it. And you know what? This subscription service, I think, is for people who are newer into the culture, who don't really want to do the legwork, and they just want to be able to get the shoes that they want. At the end of the day, I have no hate for that. But I think Nike finds themselves in this weird spot by crowning a new collaborator, opening up the vaults, and now they're trying to gain access to all these new people by basically saying, here, have what you want, and we don't even really have to work for it. Just give us your money up front, and we will make sure to hook you up. I can't really say whether that's good or bad. I just know that it's not something that I personally would get into. But before we get to the end of the episode, let's get to the release of the week. Release of the week, where I like to highlight a shoe that catches my eye. It's not always hype. This time it's historical. It's just something that I want you to know about. This is a really easy pick, folks. August 30th, the return of the AirTech Challenge 2 Hot Lava colorway is coming. It's slightly reimagined. It's going to be available everywhere. It's a piece of history. If you don't have an AirTech Challenge 2, get out there and get it. I don't know how much it's going to cost because it's not here on the Goat app, but I assume it's going to be somewhere in the $150, $160, $170 range. It's fire. It's history. You need it. Go out and buy it. You're not going to be sorry. How do you feel about the Ma Maniere collection, and how do you feel about Nike's possible attempt at a subscription service? Get in touch with the show. Instagram @FireFootwearPod is the handle. We have a group chat there. If you want to be a part of it, send me a DM. Let me know how long you've been listening to the show, and I would love to add you. You can find us on TikTok. You can find us on Facebook. We're on YouTube. Fire Footwear, a sneaker podcast with Matty Ice is what you would search. Unfortunately, I haven't been doing as much uploading as I would like, but if you want to go back and look at the content I've done, I do have some things in the hopper. Feel free to do that. Subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. If you're listening in the audio world, specifically on Apple and Spotify, or hell, any podcast app where you can put a rating, rate, review, subscribe, all that stuff, share with people. I just like to know how long people have been listening, so it means a lot. And if you want to call and give your sneaker story or give a sneaker opinion, I'd love to play it on a future episode. It is area code 202-643-9170, and that is a US number for all of my international listeners. I know there are some of you out there as I look at the analytics. I'd love to hear your story, share it, react to it. I hope this finds everybody well. I hope this finds everybody safe, and I will talk to you all next week. A big thank you from me. This is Fire Footwear. The opinions and viewpoints expressed on Fire Footwear are those of Matt Frates and his guest, and not necessarily those of the Matty Ice Media Network. Fire Footwear is exclusively owned by Matt Frates and is brought to you by the Matty Ice Media Network.